Welcome back to the Live Your Yes Life podcast. This is the space where we share channeled thoughts, discussions, and interviews to support you to go from dreaming and wishing to actively living your yes life. I am Kaela. I am one of the co-hosts, along with the best partner a girl could ask for, my mom, Lisa Limita. She's not on with me today. This is an episode where I am interviewing Nicole Tsong, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But I just want to take a second to say, hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Kaela. It's such an honor to be here with you.
So Nicole Tsong is a Taiwanese American, former journalist turned podcast host, and best-selling author. The founder of Nicole Tsong Coaching and the School of Self-Worth podcast. She helps ambitious Asian American women break generational cycles and the ceiling. An award-winning journalist, she's reached hundreds of thousands of readers as the former Fit for Life columnist for the Seattle Times. And for 3 years, she taught yoga at the White House Easter egg roll during the Obama administration. Nicole, I knew all of that about you, but it's really fun to get to just package it all together and be like, wow, look at you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun to hear it always.
And I think especially because I've had the honor of knowing you in real life over the past few years. So I know that we could keep listing so many more highlights because you're a really incredible person. So thank you for being here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same here. I think we're going to have so much fun. I mean, it's been such a privilege to work with you for the last couple of years. And so I think you know lots about me and we get to dig into some juicy topics today.
I can't wait. Okay, so I think we should just dive right in and talk about, so people know you're now a coach, and we really, the heart of what we want to get to today is talking about intuition and what happens when our intuition leads us down a path and we follow, and then it maybe doesn't feel like the golden paved path that we thought it would be, that it's a little bit rocky and it's like not quite going how we thought it would. And so that's ultimately the conversation I want to have. But I think we should back up to share folks about an experience that you had recently. So will you just give people a little bit of background about what your business or the niche of your business used to look like, and then the intuitive knowing that you were getting?
Sure. Thanks for setting that up. So, yeah, I have for a long time served high achieving women in stepping into their purpose and their calling. And for the last couple of years previous to this pivot, I was focusing on BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous people of color. And that was always, my groups were typically like, at least 50% BIPOC women. But there was a part of me that always kind of felt like I needed to niche down a little bit more. And I've been in business now for 5 years. And so I've really have a lot of the basics are really strong in my business. But that was just something that kind of kept nagging me. And then I went to a conference where I was required to introduce myself constantly. And then hearing everyone else's niches really helped me see I think this is true, but I didn't really know what the answer was. And then it just came to me. It was actually December at the end of the year. I just a lightning bolt, focus on Asian American women. And it totally felt like this facepalm moment because I am an Asian American woman. It's how could I never have thought to focus specifically on that arena? And at the time, my business has grown very steadily over the years and I'm really proud of it. And I thought, oh, wow, maybe this is it. This is going to be my total breakthrough. The minute I start talking about this, women are going to come flocking towards me. And it was also a very vulnerable moment for me to realize I had some imposter syndrome about serving Asian American women and having to move through that. What was the stuff that within me that had felt like I wasn't really good enough to be serving literally myself, right? And so there was a lot, I would say, loaded in all of that. But getting to the point where you and I were talking about this, Kaela, is the moment where it actually was not coming easily. And I would say I'm still in that place with the business that really pivoting my niche turned into a full business pivot. And I don't think I really recognized that that was going to occur for me because I've been in business for so long. I really understand messaging. I understand hosting trainings and how to do all of these things. I am not afraid to speak into the world. I have a podcast. I do all of those things. And yet I felt like I was hitting these major roadblocks in my business.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm just thinking about, we have listeners that, yes, a lot of times are entrepreneurs or in the business arena, and folks that aren't, that don't have a business. And so no matter what avenue you're listening to this conversation from, I want to invite you to think about a time when your intuition, maybe it's right now, when your intuition is speaking to you and you're like, I hear it. I hear that intuition. There's a part of me that thinks, well, that path would be easy and, like I said earlier, like a gold paved path. And then maybe there's another part of you that says, but what about XYZ? Or what if it's not as easy as I think? And this is something that I think comes up a lot no matter what our intuition is talking to us about, is we can see that something is going to change. And change in and of itself can be terrifying and put us into kind of analysis paralysis. Did you feel like how quickly, when you got this information intuitively, did you make the change, or did you find yourself kind of spinning your wheels for a while coming up against that?
I felt like I did it pretty quick. Like I'm generally an action taker. So I feel I got the hit in December and then I decided by the end of January I was going to put it into action. I recorded a podcast series at the end. Like I wanted to have a strategy. So I worked on figuring out a strategy and recorded a 3-part podcast series. And so I think by 2 months later had fully announced the pivot, was changing all of my messaging and everything that I was working on and what I was sharing with the world. So yeah, it only took me about 2 months to actually put it into action, but it was hard because I was having to really every single time change things. And any of you who are listening who are entrepreneurs, like it requires your website branding, your social media, your podcast, your emails, like everything has to switch. And I have been in business for so long, like it felt like it was turning the Titanic sometimes to like be like, oh, did we get it in that part? And like every little part of the business had to be updated. And I would say we're still going through that. Like there's parts of my website I'd really would rather still be different, but I'm sort of more focused right now on making sure I understand my audience really well and I'm giving them what they need.
Amazing. This I know about you, that you are a fast action taker. I'm wondering if you can speak to the minute for the person that feels a little stuck. They know that there is a change somewhere in their life, in their business, in their life, maybe with their health, in a relationship. There is a change that they know that they're called to make, and they're feeling stuck around change means change.
Yeah. Well, I can speak back to, I remember the first time I had a really strong intuitive hit and it took me a really long time. So this one was back when I was a yoga teacher full time and had 3 different jobs and I had the intuitive hit that I should write a book and let go of my job. That was basically my corporate yoga job. It was like half my salary. It was my benefits. And it was like, leave that job and go write a book. And I didn't have a book deal. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a draft of anything. Excuse me. And so when I did it, I was like, I have to just like make this crazy risk and just do this thing. And I did. And then it was like crickets for months. Like I just was like researching on the internet, like, how do you get a book deal? Like, what do you write about? But this is why I always do follow my intuition, is because 4 months after that, I got an email from a local publisher asking me if I wanted to write a series of yoga books for them. And they read my column in the Seattle Times at the time. And so to me, it's always like intuitive hits always lead you somewhere. And sometimes that trust has to be so big when it's happening. And I have learned over time that if I am slow about it, the cost gets bigger. And so my whole thing is like, once I get it, I always act quickly because otherwise I'll be bearing the cost of it. Like I know that if I hadn't acted quickly on this intuitive hit with my niche, I would be sitting around feeling stressed, feeling anxious. I would feel like an imposter with my current clients. I would feel like I wasn't being honest because it's actually been a challenging switch. Some people have said to me, like, why don't you go back? But I feel like that is so dishonest to myself and like what I'm here to do that I'm like, I would not do that. What I need to do is apply myself to figure out what it is I haven't worked, like just get the details correct and really make a shift in a way that feels really true to me instead of going backward, if that makes sense.
That was so powerful. And I keep replaying something that you said that really stuck me. You said, I learned over time that if I'm slow about it, the cost gets bigger. Because I find that to be so true, which doesn't mean that we just like get an intuitive hit and then just like recklessly, abandon all logic and like run towards it with nothing. It just means that we don't drag our feet. Like we don't slow. Sometimes the process is just one step in front of the other, but we're not slowing the process down because we're afraid.
Yeah, and I feel like there's such a distinction because I'm like a prepared person. I'm like a very pragmatic person. Like when I was doing that, leaving the yoga job, I was like, okay, like how are my finances? Where am I at? Like, can I make this work? Can I ramp up like teaching yoga and other ways to make this shift happen. And in this case, particularly, with my business, I was like, my business is actually on very solid footing. So I'm making a change where I have like really good revenue coming in from other areas as I'm making the switch into my main course. So I always am like, I like to say those things because I always, with my own clients, we work a lot on making intuitive leaps. And a lot of my women ultimately do want to leave their jobs. And I'm like, leave your job when the timing is right, not because you are reactive or you hate it and there's something else out there for you. Like, let's be calm, develop your business like while you're actually working. And that moment will be so clear. And then when you leave in that moment, it will be so much easier and the flow will be there versus like trying to force something. So there's such a balance, I think, for all of us, but it's like, it's weighing the cost. And I really think with intuition, with each of us, it is so individual and we have to tune into what's right for us.
For me personally, and I share this with a lot of my clients, when there's a little bit of fear, that's actually good information to me. Like if it feels so easy, I'm like, it's probably not it. Like I probably miss it, or I'm like, I just want it to be easy. When my intuition is really speaking to me, I'm like, really, that thing, that this is the avenue, and there's a little bit of fear, and that lets me know that I'm on the path that is being laid out for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's like there's always, to me, it's like a two-parter. You get the intuitive hit and the fear comes right after. And so the fear is always going to show up immediately because you've never done it before or you would have already done it. And that's what I always remind myself and everyone else. I'm like, well, it's an intuitive hit because you haven't done it. It's not like if you were doing it, there'd be no intuitive hit. So we have to remember that there's always going to be this 1-2 punch. And then you just have to watch out if the fear is stopping you. And sometimes I know for myself, like I drag my feet a little bit when I get an intuitive hit because I'm nervous, I'm scared about it, but I just don't let it stop me fully.
Yeah, I agree that we can. I like to talk about how I think of fear as if it was like a toddler in the back seat. So I'm not going to let the toddler drive the car. Like fear doesn't get to drive. It's welcome to hang out in the back seat, tucked in with a snack. It can come with me, but it doesn't call the shots. It doesn't give me the directions. It just can come along for the ride.
Yeah, I always like to think of it that way too, because it's not, we're human. We're always going to feel fear. And I think sometimes too, it helps me to remember that your brain literally treats change like you're dying. Like you literally think you are on the edge of a cliff and you're going to get pushed off and you will die. And I'm like, it just is not true, but it's going to feel that way. And the more you can get comfortable with understanding that's the process and it's going to feel like you're dying and you don't die. And every time you do that over and over again, you get more practice at just being like, oh, this is normal. I feel like I'm going to die, but I'm not going to. And let me just follow the path.
And I really want to take a moment just to also honor you for the specific change that you made of seeing this is the intuitive hit I get to follow because it allows me to be even more true to me. Not that the clients you were serving and the niche that you were in wasn't true for you and wasn't a way for you to share your gifts, but it was a way to come home even more. And for you to say, like, this is really what lights me up and really where my calling is. And it's courageous to answer a calling that feels even more true when you know that you're going to make a shift like that. So I just wanted to honor you because that's a big thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's been a very big personal journey too, to recognize for myself. Like, I've been uncovering a lot of things around what did I care about at the time in my life, the clients that I'm working with. And I've had to really learn a lot more about myself, like the way I grew up, the way I think about things, what I've overcome to be the person I am now, and then to be able to articulate that into the world. And it's been a really big unpeeling, like that I just didn't even expect for myself. Like, I just thought I'd pivot and great, like I would just go for it, but actually it's been a bigger discovery of who I am, and that's been just really expansive and powerful.
Wow, that's cool to hear that it's been an even bigger discovery, which I find would be true for anybody. If you are following an intuitive hit, you're going anyways, even with the fear, that of course there would be more that you're discovering about yourself. Is there anything you would like to share about what you've discovered about yourself?
Well, I feel like I've discovered a lot about, just the way I feel like for when your parents are immigrants and the way that you're raised, I feel like the biggest thing I've discovered, and I have never really put language to this or thought about it a ton before this year, is that, typically in Asian culture, the collective is important. The group is more important than the individual. And then we live in America, or I do, which is like a highly individualistic society. Like we rank so high in that. So the clash for a lot of Asian women is between that, because you're raised to like honor your parents, you're raised that family comes first, you're raised that they're more important than you are. And so you can get into perfectionism and people pleasing, which is really common, I think, for a lot of women, but it comes from a different place. And so then when you're an adult, now you're, being told to be super individualistic, be so bold, be direct, be domineering. Like that's how you're going to succeed. And I think women a lot in general struggle with that in the workplace. But there's this whole other cultural element for Asian American women that they're grappling with. And I don't think I even recognized for myself. Like I moved through all of that myself, partly because in my journey from being a journalist to a yoga teacher, like you have to really get over a lot of that to be able to stand in front of a room, be truly authentic in yourself, and get people to do the poses you want them to do. So I kind of pushed through that just a decade ago anyway. But now I'm recognizing and seeing like some of the cultural things that really hampered me at that time and what I had to move through. And then how do I support women to do that when who aren't going through my specific journey? Like what's their journey to actually seeing it? And so it's just been a really, I don't know, like it's made me actually in certain ways like just much more grateful for my family and the way that they raised me and the way I think about it. And then also like how do we find the balance where you can still love your family and honor them, but then also really be authentically yourself.
That's very powerful. Thank you. And I love the advice that you're giving, essentially, of when you notice that you have any particular challenge or a shared challenge, to also look at, and where is this coming from for me personally? Because it might be different than the person next to me. And so the path that we move forward also might need to be different because our come from is different.
Yeah, exactly. And I always am watchful and mindful of this. Like we cannot stereotype in any group, right? There's so many individual experiences, but there are general experiences that can be more true than not, right? And so I'm always playing in that arena, I feel like right now, and really looking at where is that experience coming true? Because like my women are ambitious and smart and like they go for it. And so sometimes they're not even recognizing a lot of the things that are holding them back. And it can be really hard to distinguish between what's the personal development side of it, what's the workplace part of it, what is cultural, like there's all these different things at play. And so I've actually been finding it to be such a really interesting journey to like go deeper into it. Like I've been playing a lot in the realms of like Asian mental health, for example, is like not like getting help in the Asian culture is really looked down upon. So for a lot of people, going to therapy is like not normal, which is very normalized, I feel like, in America these days, but not for Asian cultures. So like that kind of thing, it's like, oh, it's like kind of fascinating to me. Like what is the root of that? Like what causes people to feel like asking for help or going to get help is challenging or not something that you typically do. And then I feel like a lot of my job and the reason I'm called to do this is to help people to normalize that. Like it's good to ask for help. What kind of help will really support you? What's the distinction between your own stuff and other people's stuff, and understanding the differences and how to act upon that? Like there's just so many skill sets that I feel like will really help the women that I help. And so it's been really fun too for me to be on this journey of like, okay, like what's resonating with them, what's going to really work for them, what are they looking for?
I love that. I want to pick up a thread that, so earlier we were talking about how, okay, your intuition is saying, hey, time to make a change, time to pivot, time to go over here. And that fear comes right back. We call it the 1 2 punch. And we go anyways. We take the step, we make the change, whatever the shift is, we go. And then I think that people find like, oh no, it's not quite working how I thought it would. Like it's getting harder or worse or whatever word we want to use, of like it's not just an easy breezy joyful shift. Like our life does not suddenly become unicorns and rainbows because we listen to our intuition. So can you speak into, well, let me ask a question and then I'll ask your thoughts on this. The question is, so sometimes I hear people say, oh no, did I choose wrong? Because it's getting harder before it gets better. So did I choose wrong? And so what's your take on that?
Well, that is a big question, Kayla. But I feel like for there is no choosing wrong with your intuition, as long as you're listening to what your intuition really is. And sometimes I do think people have challenges listening to intuition versus reaction. So that would be the first place is like if you're in any kind of reactive space, that's not your intuition. But like a lot of people associate gut hits with intuition. And I don't really like the term gut hits because sometimes that's a reactive hit. So I'm just going to put that out there first. Like, and again, it's never wrong, but it's just helpful and useful for us to have that distinction. And then when you do have an intuitive hit and it feels like it's not going well, and if you're doing something and you're like, for me, I actually often will check myself. I'm just like, is this still right? Am I still on path? Is this the correct thing to do? And like I remember like when I talked about getting that book deal, like I did not know that book deal was coming. And I was like, I mean, I was depressed a lot. Like I was, on the internet searching, I was writing. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And other people looked at me kind of like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I have no idea, and I did not know that email was coming. But what I have learned over time with these intuitive hits is like, there is always a miracle on the other side. You just don't know when you're going to get it and you don't know how it's going to arrive, and that's where so much trust and faith comes in. And this is where if you don't have that trust and faith, like that's the skill to develop, to learn to build the strength of that muscle, because if you don't have it, you are going to have a really hard time with intuition. Like I think people want it because it does kind of it sounds like unicorn and rainbows. You're like, oh, my life will be so great. I'm like, in fact, actually my experience, and I call it God, but it can be source, universe, whatever you use, he does not give me easy things. Like he actually, in fact, gives me pretty challenging things, but it's because he knows I can rise to the occasion. He knows that I'm here to do those things. And I have risen to the occasion before. Like I've developed that relationship. And so I think the more that we start to really understand what that relationship is, why we're being called in the direction that we're being called, then you can just start to be like, well, I don't know what this is about because I don't know everything in the universe. I only know like this moment in my life, and I'm supposed to follow a direction. And so if I can just keep following that direction, something magical will happen. And I've had enough magic in my life that I trust that it will happen. I just don't know when. And my job is to say, okay, I don't know what's going on, but my job is to just keep taking the next step.
So powerful. My mind works in analogies. And so the vision that I was seeing is if you want to build a house of intuition, trust and faith are your hammer and nails. Like these are the tools and the resources that we need. And I have seen that in my own life so many times that truly trust and faith are the most important resources and tools that allows us to build the house of our intuition. But I think that sometimes we are trying to pick up a different tool that's just it's just not the thing that we need when we're working with our intuition, which might be things like past evidence or cold hard proof. And that's where we can slow ourselves down of thinking, if I don't have this specific evidence right now today, then I'm going to tell myself that it's not working. And I just want to offer that we don't always need that. Like probably what you need is more trust and faith than cold evidence to affirm that you're on your path, because following a new path, changing your life by following intuition and information that you've been given, probably you're creating the new evidence as you go. You haven't had it before.
For sure. And I also I love the tool analogy. And I also think of tools like you can use tools in different ways. Like you could have a hammer to like build a house or you can have it to crush it. Right. And so sometimes we wield them, I think, incorrectly. And we think that we're doing it instead of being like, because you can look for signs everywhere and you could be like, oh, the signs are in my direction. Oh, the signs are going the wrong way. Right. So it's like, how do you choose to really say, okay, this is showing me I'm on the right path? How do I trust myself? And that's a big part of it. And I think, trusting yourself is such a strength over time if you can really develop it, but it really takes a lot to get stronger with it, and to wield it in a way that's, I don't know, ultimately leading you in the direction you want to go in your life versus feeling like you're stuck.
What's helping you keep going? Because you've made this change. You had shared with us. So, it would have been great if there were like now Asian American women just lining up down the doors, like pounding on your door. And it's not that way yet. So, what's keeping you going while you're here?
Yeah, I feel what's keeping me going. It's a great question. I feel like I have been, it's for me, it's always, especially with business, it's a combo of mindset and strategy. And so I'm always looking for, like, on the mindset side of it, I'm always looking for the evidence that it is working. So even though I may not have the clients and like the abundance that I'm expecting or hoping for yet, I am looking at any type of evidence that it's starting to work. like, okay, like this, every day, like this happens. So now that's proof to me. Like I've been on a TikTok challenge. So I'm like, okay, like people responded to that one. So that's showing me evidence that like I'm going in the right direction. But then I also always have strategies. And so for myself, it's like, okay, where can I just start to apply myself and just be diligent and keep it up until I know that it will eventually shift and the momentum will change. But it does require me to be persistent, consistent, and staying with it, even when I don't want to. Because I think that's the hardest thing about entrepreneurship is like we want to work based on our feelings every day. And while some days there are days where we really do need to take a little bit of time for ourselves, but there's a lot of days where you just gotta like, dig in and you just have to say, okay, like I'm just gonna do the thing I said I was gonna do today. And then let it go be in the world and do its job. And then I'm going to just keep going with it. Does that make sense? Like we just
Totally.
not giving up, because I could give up. I definitely could have given up because like I've tried a couple different strategies that didn't work that well. And it's not even that they didn't work that well. I just didn't like them. Like there were some social media strategies I just didn't enjoy. So I stopped doing it and I switched. But it's like we just have to be like just being consistent, persistent, you will get more information. Like the key when you keep going, you keep learning, you keep growing, and that inevitably will take you down the pathway that you're going for.
As you're talking, what's coming to me is look for what there is, not for what there isn't. And I think it was at the end of our last coaching session together, we were talking about bamboo, right? Was that you? I'm like, I feel like I talk about bamboo a lot. I
I
don't
don't know
know.
if we talked about bamboo, so
Okay.
remind me.
Okay. Well, bamboo takes 5 years to grow. And so before it is fully sprouting, we might not necessarily see evidence that it's growing, right? Because the evidence is occurring, but it's underground. And this, I think, happens for a lot of us when we're making a change is that the evidence is there, we just can't see it yet. And so, um, and I think that people get into this place. They're like, okay, I'm looking for this certain kind of evidence so I know it's working, but I don't have that yet. And so my reminder will be, well, look for what is there. So maybe you don't have that evidence yet, but what is there? It could be like, oh, well, in the bamboo analogy, well, like now the weather is changing to promote growth. So what's there is appropriate weather. And so we can just apply that in our life that maybe the specific result that you're looking for isn't there yet, but what is there? And maybe that's as simple as like maybe your mindset is like the weather. Well, I have now changed my mindset to be an appropriate place for this result to occur. And that can be supportive too.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something that I always have to watch is that so let's just use TikTok as an example. Like it could be like, okay, none of those TikTok hits, and then I could just be depressed, right? Which has happened by the way. And then there's the next day and I make them again, and then they do hit, and now I'm happy. And then I have to watch for myself that that's not actually determining how I feel. It's just evidence of what's working or not working, because in order for it to work, I have to feel happy, expansive, no matter what is occurring on TikTok. And that's such a balance, right? Because like those social media in particular is designed to make us happy or not, whether people like it. And so my job is always like the happier and more consistent I can stay personally, then I can just actually test things, see how it goes, not let that be swaying me one way or the other. Like keep writing down wins that could be related to TikTok, but could not be related to it. And then have myself be in that grounded space because that grounded space is going to get me where I want to go versus letting it be, like to the whim of anything else. And it's like you're saying with the bamboo, it's like me being consistent and grounded is being like, I just trust that bamboo is growing and some days are sunny, some days are rainy. Whatever is going on, it's still all growing.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a very beautiful conversation. Thank you for sharing your own life as an example with us to look for ourselves. And listeners, that's my invitation for you is to look at what's the intuitive nudge or information or divine download that you've been receiving. And are you dragging your feet on it? Because as Nicole said, the slower you go, the more it costs. So we want to make sure that we're not dragging our feet on it. And can you then take action, letting the fear come with you, knowing that the fear does not need to inhibit you, and stay committed, consistent, and persistent while you're creating the new evidence? That's the invitation. Nicole, anything else that you want to share as we wrap? And then I'll also ask about where people can find and follow you.
I would say that if you are feeling scared about your intuitive nudges, could you just do like one tiny thing in that direction versus thinking, because a lot of times people think of it, it's like, I got to leap off the cliff. And I'm like, those are not great ones to start with. Like, start with something small. Like, just really let yourself today, like, what's my intuition telling me for my calendar today, for moving my body today, or for finishing up work, that kind of thing, versus making it so big and scary. And then that will help you a lot more towards making the big ones.
That is great. Okay, and now where can people find and follow to get more of you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Nicole Tsong, TikTok, Nicole Tsong _, and then my website, NicoleTsong.com are the best ways to reach me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on. Listener, thank you for joining us. Wait, really quick before we go, I want to be sure that you know about all of the ways that you can work with us. So obviously you're already here listening to our podcast, and we have 2 other amazing resources by the same name as this podcast. We have a free Facebook group and a book that you can get on Amazon. It is called Live Your Yes Life. So I want to be sure that you join us in our Facebook group, head over to Amazon, grab our book, and like and subscribe this podcast so you never miss one of our episodes. We drop a new episode each week. Thanks for tuning in.